Hey there, my name is Brashler, and in this video, I want to show you my corporate setup for my Yamaha DM3. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear, no matter where you're starting from. Also, if you are on a path wanting to learn a few more tips and tricks for your audio tool belt, head over to audiotoolkit.co, where I have a weekly newsletter where I email you some of my favorite tips and tricks of my audio experience. So head over to audiotoolkit.co and check that out. It is for free and it goes to your inbox every week. Now let's actually just go ahead and dive in and see what my corporate setup is for a Yamaha DM3. Now, the Yamaha DM3 is a fantastic small corporate setup console. It's 16 channels of inputs. On the back of the console, you have 8 channels of outputs, and then you also have all of your Dante connectivity if you have the DM3D, which is what I have here. Now, this is great for most corporate setups. A corporate setup for me that's going to be ideal for the DM3 is having 8 microphones that are wireless, maybe a podium mic or a VOG mic, voice of God, and then your video inputs. Now, I have my Yamaha DM3 set up with my corporate scene here, and I'm just going to dive through all of the different setups that I have on my DM3 to help you create a show file or a scene for your DM3. Now, if you are wanting to skip all of this and just download my scene, I have it for sale over at my website at drewbrashler.com. So you can head over there and purchase it, or you can watch this entire video and see how I have everything programmed. So on my first 8 faders on my scene, I have my wireless. And so in this case, I'm going to have all of my wireless plugged into my 8 inputs on the back of the DM3. Now I can obviously switch this to be a Dante input if I have a Shure wireless or some inputs on a TO or a Rio that's sitting up on stage. But in this case, I'm going to try and contain everything to just the DM3. That way, if I don't have any extra setup, then I can just keep it all on my console here. So I have 8 channels of wireless of RF or a talking microphone. So we can see that I have this SM57 and this is plugged into my input 1. And so I'm going to go here and turn up my gain on this. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. So we can see that we have this input here. Now I have 8 wireless set up on my first 8 faders. Now, the benefit of having them on the first 8 faders is with the new version 3 firmware, you have a built-in 8 channels of auto mixer. So we can go click into our auto mixer here, and I already have them programmed and turned on to be able to do auto mixing on the first 8 channels. Now, these do not exist on any other channels other than the first 8 channels. So that's why I have my wireless on channels 1 through 8. So we can go ahead and X out of here. I do typically have my first dynamics as a gate just to mute the microphone when someone's not speaking. And then I will dial in my threshold to get that to where it's reducing some of the volume when that person is not talking and not presenting. I then have my Dynamics 2 as my compressor for that channel. And with speech, I typically will have my attack around 14 to 20 milliseconds, and then my release is typically between 60 and 100 milliseconds, depending on that speaker or that presenter. Now, I always use a ratio of about 4 to 1 when I'm starting out, and then I can dial that in either less compression or more compression as that speaker starts presenting. Now on my input 9 through 16, this is where I have my video inputs. Now on a typical corporate show, you're going to have 4 computers. You're going to have a Malumen or playback, video playback 1 and 2, typically a primary and a backup. And then you're going to have a graphics or a PowerPoint or a keynote machine. And I typically will have those as mono, because most of the presentations that people have, they will take a video that's going to be very dynamic and needs really good audio, and they will export that into an MP4 and have that playing on the playback or the Malumen machines. And so for the most part, graphics or PowerPoint presentations don't need stereo audio. They can be get away with being a mono source. Now, obviously, if we needed to have it be stereo, we can go ahead and remove my 15 and 16, and we can pair these two together and then make another graphics that's stereo. But in this case, I'm going to be putting stereo on my two playback machines, which is Malumen or a video playback source, and then my graphics machines are going to be mono. So I have paired up channels 9 and 10 to be my playback. We have 11 and 12 being my playback 2. And then we have graphics 1 as mono and graphics 2 as mono as well. Now, these are full range inputs, so I'm not doing anything with the EQ. I'm keeping them nice and flat. As well as the dynamics, I will typically just leave this as a gate when something is not being played. So I have my threshold set very low, down at -72. That way, when there's no video playing, it will just go ahead and mute or gate down that channel. Now, my next two channels, I have a podium and a VOG mic. Now, a podium obviously is going to be a podium up on the stage, and I have my one input for that. I also have a VOG mic. Now, a VOG mic is going to be an announcement mic that's sitting at front of house that people will typically make an announcement, like our program will begin in 5 minutes. So that VOG mic is just going to be on 16, and on 15 is my podium mic. And so with those two microphones, I'm doing a little bit of EQ to get out some of the low end as well as my gate and my compressor. Now moving on, I go to my FX and Mon section. Now this one is kind of fun. I do a little bit of different things to my 3 channels that we have here. Now by default, this first channel is going to be a stereo in. And then these 2 channels are my effects returns. Now on my stereo in, I have made this pulling from USB 1 and 2, and this is typically where I have my QLab. And so we can see my QLab machine right here, and so I'm just going to unmute this and press play.
The forum will begin in 15 minutes.
Now, QLab is going to be my main audio source that I am playing stingers or announcements from. So a stinger is going to be music that a speaker or a presenter would walk up onto stage with, and then we have our announcements or our pre-recorded VOGs. Now, QLab is a fantastic program, and you need to go download this if you're not using it already. It is going to be my main playback source for any of my VOGs or stingers that I use on a show day. Now, because corporate situations don't typically use a reverb or a delay or a chorus or flanger, I am going to replace my Effects 1 return and my Effects 2 return with Dante inputs that I will have available to me if I have some other playback machines or some other things that need to be stereo. Now, by default, this channel is stereo, and the Effects return 2 is also stereo. Now, if we click into this and we go up here, typically this is set to Effects 1 left and right. But we can actually change this to be any input that we want to. So we can pull from our inputs, our Dante, or our USB returns from a computer. Now in my case, I have this already set to Dante 13 and 14, and we can see that I have some music playing here. So that's where I have my Spotify playing into this. So we could go ahead and change that name if we want to. So that gives me my 3 stereo playback channels. So I have QLab, I have Spotify, and if I wanted to, I could have my iTunes or another playback machine on Dante here on my console. So this has expanded me to have my 8 channels of RF, my video playback and graphics, podium and VOG, as well as QLab, which is coming in on the USB input of my console with my computer. And then I have my Dante 13 through 16 on my 2 effects return channels. Now in total, this gives me 22 channels if you have the 16 typical channels, as well as our 3 stereo inputs that we have here. Now on the output side of things, we have a few things that we want to make sure that we have set up in a typical corporate situation. Now, my Foldback is my first aux send, or my first mix bus here. Now, a foldback is going to be a monitor that's downstage of your presenters and gives them a little bit of reinforcing if they feel like they are muted in the house. You can bring some volume back through your foldbacks back so they can hear themselves through those foldbacks if the PA is very directional and the room isn't very live. If you don't have a foldback and send some of that volume back through them, sometimes your presenters will come out and say, "Hello, is this thing on?" And we obviously don't want them to say that. So in this case, we have the foldback allowing us to give them a little bit of volume off of those downstage wedges so that they can hear themselves when they're out on stage. The other thing for a foldback is you want to play your stingers or your playback, like from your Malumen or your graphics, anything like that. You want to have that coming to them from those downstage wedges. So in that case, my foldback is going to be my very first thing that I have. The next thing that I have is a Zoom feed. Now, a Zoom feed is obviously for Zoom, and we want our Zoom presenter to hear everything that's happening in the room, but not hear themselves. So in this case, I will typically end up using a Malumen machine or one of my video playback machines for a Zoom. And so in this case, on my playback 2, this is where I would typically make sure that my Zoom feed is not turned on for my playback 2. And that way, when we are using Zoom on that playback 2, we are able to hear that in the room when I unmute it and turn it up. But then that presenter is not hearing an echo of themselves, which is very important. But we want them to be able to hear what's happening in the room. For instance, a stinger or someone introducing them on stage before the Zoom session goes live. So that's typically what I will use my Zoom feed for. Now, the next thing that I have is BSMs. Now, these are backstage monitors or video anchors, and this is for your team back in video land being able to hear what's happening up on the stage or any of the videos that they are playing. Now, this can also be your backstage monitors at your loading points of the stage. So if your backstage area has the loading points that are behind drape, then you would want to have some monitors back there for the presenters to hear what's happening on stage before they go out. And that's where I'm going to be having my BSM feed for that. The next thing that I have over is a lobby feed. Now, my lobby feed I have as a mix bus, and that way I can send a VOG mic directly to the lobby, maybe seeing pre-fader type of a thing, and that way I can make announcements via that VOG mic for the people that are out in the lobby to hear. Now, this is important between sessions that are happening inside your corporate room because we want to be able to have all of those people that are grabbing snacks and refreshments to hear that the session is going to begin in another 5 minutes. So I have that as my lobby feed. Now, the next 2 channels are going to be for my PA. So my PA front fill is going to be a speaker that's at the downstage lip pointing out towards the audience to cover that center front section that might be outside of the throw of the PA that's stereo. And so I always have a front fill here, and I want to make sure that I have adjustment over what's going to this because I don't want to have too much of a lav microphone or a headset microphone going into that because, one, the person that's sitting down in those first tables is so close to the presenter that they might be hearing some of that already off of the stage. But then two, those are the closest speakers to your presenter. So that has the greatest chance of giving feedback to the presenters that are out on stage. So I want to make sure that I'm sending just slightly less than a normal volume to those. The next thing that I have on my Mix 6 is going to be my subwoofer. So typically on a corporate situation, I am sending a left, right, a sub, and a fill. And my sub is obviously going to be for my subwoofers. I don't want any of my vocal channels or my speech channels going through to my subwoofer because I don't want those big plosives that happen when people say those deeper words. But I do want my QLab, my Malumen machines, my graphics machines going to those subwoofers to give a full range sound to any of the audio that's being played from those sources. The next thing that I have is a record left-right. Now the record left-right I have going to my USB recorder so that when I press record on that, I am getting a nice, good mixed sound via my recording matrix. mix. Now, the other thing that I have for this is if I was sending to a video recorder, I would be sending this mix. Or if I was sending to a stream, I would also be using this mix. Now, because this is a matrix, I can send whatever I want to this. And the great thing about the DM3 is I'm able to send from the channels directly to my matrix, which is fantastic. So it's just another mix bus for me to be able to send to. My very last thing is my stereo left-right. Now, this is going to be for my main PA, which the audience is hearing. So we can see that I have green for any main speakers that people are going to be listening to. Now again, for my corporate situation, I have a left-right and then sub and fill. Now, all of my mix buses are set up as post-fader. Now, the reason for this is I want any of my channels to be post-fader to those monitors, or those stream sends, or those recording sends. All of that's post-fader because if I want to take a channel down in volume, I want it to be adjusting all of those sources at the same time. Now, the Yamaha DM3 allows us to have really good control over what's coming from our channels to our mixes. So let's go through my channels here and I'll show you how I have these set up. So on my 8 microphones here, I have them being sent as a pre-fader to that Foldback monitor. So I don't have them turned on just right now because I don't want to automatically be sending volume to those if I don't need to. Another instance is I would have Q&A mics being on my last 2 wireless. So in this case, it would be 7 and 8. So if I was wanting to send those Q&A mics to that stage monitor, then I would go ahead and select RF7 and I would turn this up to the volume that I need to have the presenters being able to hear those microphones nice and clear. And because this is pre-fader, no matter where my volume is on this, the presenter will always be able to hear those if they are unmuted, which is key. Now, the next thing that we have is my Zoom feed, my BSM, my lobby, my PA front fill, and my PA sub. Now, we can see that these are turned on for my Zoom feed, BSMs, lobby, PA front fill, but it's not turned on to my sub, and that's because I don't want my voice channels or my speech channels going to that subwoofer. Now, these are set to post-fader, meaning that if I have a mix here of the different microphones, those sources, those output sources, are hearing the mix that I have on the channels, which is great. Now, if we swipe to the right, we will get to our record feed. And this is where I have all of my channels here going to this record feed at 0 dB, meaning that all of my channels are mixed perfectly into my record feed. Now, if I needed to raise or lower volume for my records, all I would have to do is go select the channel that I want to adjust, go to adjust my send fader here, and I could either turn up or down according to what I wanted for that feed. Now let's go to my video channels here. Now, if we go to my playback, we will see that this is being sent to my foldbacks and my entire PA at 0. And that's because I want this to be post-fader. So when I'm playing something from a video, I want all of the sources to get my volume adjustments here when I'm making that volume adjustment for writing in that music or that video. Now we will also see that this is also being sent to my records at 0. Now we want this going to the subwoofer, which it is in this case, because we want this to be a full range sound. This is where I want my subs coming from. Now if we go through the rest of my channels here, we will see that my Playback 2 is not going to my Zoom feed because I did turn that off, but we could go ahead and turn that back on if we're not using it for Zoom. We have my Graphics 1 and my Graphics 2, which are all similar volumes as the rest of my playback. Now we go to my podium mic and we notice that this is not going to the foldback or the subwoofer, which is ideal. We don't want a podium mic going to the subs. And so we can see that my record is also at 0. Then we have my VOG mic. Now my VOG mic is going to my foldbacks, and that's because I want the presenters up on stage to hear any of those announcements that that VOG mic is making. Now I'm not sending that to my sub, again, because it is a voice speech channel. Now, if we go to my effects mons, we can see that my stereo in, which is my QLab, is being sent post-fader to everything, as well as my 2 Dante stereo channels is the same thing. Now, one other great thing about the DM3 is that there are graphic EQs built into the outputs of the DM3. So I have my stereo selected here, and we can go and click into my graphic EQ. And so we can see all of my graphic EQ adjustments for my PA left, my subwoofer, my PA front fill, and my lobby send, as well as the rest of these channels. These are also available for. Now, the GEQ is not available for my matrix, which is one of the reasons for the DM3 that I'm not sending my main PA through a matrix. I want to keep that just for a stream or a press or a record feed because there's a little bit less functionality in that. Now, I can still do my PA tuning on my main left-right, and it's not going to affect any of my record or my stream sends because those are all separate from my left-right bus. All my channels are being sent to the record individually before my main left-right. That way I can do any PA tuning on my main left-right, and that will be great for in-room, and then I have my stream or my recording or my press feed completely isolated from that. Now, the very last thing that I do with my DM3 setup here is I utilize my custom fader bank sections here. So on my custom one, I have my microphones 1 through 4, followed by playback 1, playback 2, graphics 1, and graphics 2, and my QLab on my stereo fader. So from this page right here, I can adjust my first 4 microphones, as well as all of my main audio and video playback sources on this same page. Now on my custom 2, I then have RF 5 through 8, as well as my same playback channels that I have for playback 1, 2, graphics 1 and 2, and my QLab. Now what's great about this is this allows me to have my stingers fade along with unmuting my presenter microphones. Now, if I need to unmute multiple microphones at the same time, say I have 6 to 8 presenters up on stage that are all going out at the same time, I utilize my user-defined keys for my on buttons for my first 6 RF channels. So here's RF 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So from this page right here, I can control all 8 microphones as far as mute goes, as well as my playback and my QLab, all from this one page. Here's the mutes for all my 6 microphones, followed by 7 and 8, and here's the QLab for controlling that stinger as they are going on stage. Now, like I said, the DM3 is going to be a perfect sized console for a lot of corporate setups out there. 8 microphones, some playback, maybe a VOG mic, maybe a podium mic. This is going to be ideal for all of those smaller setups. The minute that you go past this 8 channels of wireless, I think is where you're going to start seeing some limitations of the DM3. Now we could utilize the rest of my channels here, so move these 2 playback to my Dante Stereo 1 and 2 channels that I have here, and that would give us an additional 4 microphones, giving us 12 channels of RF if we wanted to. But we would have to use either a Dante virtual sound card or a TO or a Rio rack to be able to get those additional channels into Dante. But again, once we reach that point, that's when we need to be looking at a different console that has a higher input and output capabilities to it. For instance, the DM7 or the QL1. But for most of those corporate setups, this is going to be a perfect console. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. Now, if you do happen to have a question, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make, post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com, where I have this scene for sale for your DM3, as well as some other things for some other consoles as well. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.